I feel like I was broken and I fell apart and then came out the other side more whole probably than I had ever been, if that makes any sense.
Hello, and welcome to the Big 4-0 podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie McLaughlin. In our 20s and 30s, we spend so much time and energy striving for success and checking all the boxes, but it's usually according to the standards or approval of some external authority. Then, in the years around age 40, many of us start to redefine who we are, what success means, and what we want out of life. We learn to have more confidence in our own authority and experience, and our life adjusts accordingly. Or we ignore it all and deal with the repercussions of not evolving. It's not always a smooth process. I fought against the transition, which made getting through it a messier process than it had to be. On this podcast, I welcome you to tap into my stories and experience, as well as those of my guests, to help you make your way through your own transition and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes we made along the way. Today, my guest is Edel Howlin, who is a communications consultant and former journalist whose path has taken her from Dublin, Ireland, to Houston, Texas, to Philadelphia, PA. Her story is a great example of what can bloom when life forces you to pause and ask, but who am I really? Hi, Edel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephanie. It is so good to be here. Oh my goodness. So good.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled to have you, partially because I get to listen to your accent for the next however long. I might drag this one out just so I can listen to your accent longer.
Well, it's
My-
fake.
It's fake. It's fake. You can't fake a Dublin accent. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's the real thing. I know enough to know. I lived there for a little while when I was in college. And I've very deep Irish roots and all of that. Just visited family last summer over there. So it's very, very dear to me.
I love it. I love it. It is amazing for such a small country how many of us get around
It
and how
is.
much we've managed to populate the world. So yeah, it is.
You're right. It
No,
is. It's a tiny country for that amount of impact.
small but
Well done
mighty.
you, as they say.
Thanks.
All right. Enough silliness. Let's be serious now. No,
All
not
right.
really, but why don't we start at the beginning? I love your story, and there's some pieces in here, including literal breadcrumbs that we're going to get to that are very exciting. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me about the forces that shaped you. Who were you when our story begins?
Sure. As you pointed out, I am Irish, and I want to say it is now like 17 years ago that I found myself moving to the United States, to Houston. And my husband had got an opportunity for a job. We had literally actually just gotten married a week later. We moved to America. And I've had this weird journey, Stephanie, where I was like, I wasn't very good in school. I went to college, didn't really know what I wanted to do, which is so many of our stories, right?
Mhm.
And I studied science because that seemed like a good idea. And I had this notion, I mean, I don't know why I did this, but I picked like math and physics and geology and computer science. And as you will learn my story, you'll learn none of those things.
Right?
Seemed like a good fit.
Were you any good at them in school, though?
No.
Yeah. Understood.
Right.
Understood. Did your parents tell you to pursue those science tracks?
No.
No.
What it
Okay.
what it was, and I kind of grew up sort of in a generation, which I think is probably your generation too, right? Is where your parents weren't really that too involved in like your career choices.
Mm.
You were or maybe it was just different for me, but sure they were supportive and they wanted us to go to college and everything, but there wasn't like a hard plan that we had to follow, and they weren't like crazy tapped in the way I think kind of parents are nowadays,
Okay.
right? People are way more tapped in. So what I had was I had a really good English teacher and I had a really good physics teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, kind of what was like my North Star at that time. I was like, this feels like it makes sense because I don't really know what else I want to do. So it was either going to be some form of English type study or science. And so I landed with science because a couple of my other friends were doing it at the time. So there was sort of a messy period here where I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I leave college with a statistics degree and I think I'm going to work in, I don't know what, statistic like jobs. do that for a little while. And all along my whole life, I've always loved radio. Always. There are pictures of me with headphones as a little kid listening to music. I would record myself introducing songs on the
I
radio.
love it.
And so there was always that love of radio and music there in my life. And so while I was working, I did this little 9-week course where I learned about all the different elements that go into making like a radio show or making radio work. So I learned there were producers, I learned there were hosts, I learned there were kind of tracks that you would pick to play. And some of it was obvious and some of it was less obvious. And now I was like, oh, I could work behind the scenes doing radio. Like this
Mm.
could be a career. So, having graduated from college and worked for a year, I suddenly was like, this is the path for me. I knew it. I knew that I wanted to be in radio. And so I was building my career in Dublin right before I moved to Houston with my husband. I was like, this is the track I'm on. I want to be in radio. I love radio. I want to work on a show. I want to build a radio show. This is my dream. And getting to Houston, I started to build that dream. I worked in commercial radio, I worked in public media for a long time, and I was there building a public affairs show from scratch. My dream job. Here I am, living in a different country, ready for this. And that was the path that I was always going to be on. And I felt like we were probably going to be in Houston for the whole time. And then sort of a bunch of different things happen. We're living in Houston. We experienced Hurricane Harvey, which was devastating to the city. One of the biggest hurricanes to hit it, like the rain event that it was too. And I at the time was working for the news station. So I'm reporting from my house as much as I can. I'm
Right.
supporting the effort. I'm getting up in the morning to talk to like BBC Northern Ireland to tell them what's going on and reporting for NPR and other places, like giving kind of input. And it was crazy and it was painful. And I just thought, I don't know if I love this city enough to go through this again. Right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I loved Houston. And because of the work that I did as a journalist, I knew it so much better
Yeah.
than any other blow in.
Yeah.
And I'm still so attached to it, but I just was like, I just don't know if I love it enough. I don't think it's my forever home. And at the time, my husband was working for, like, he had started up a business with a friend of his in India, and he was working from home. And so my life was in Houston, it was in the city, but we were living in the suburbs. This is the maddest thing, but the suburb where we live, there were all these cemeteries or cemeteries, as we call them in Ireland. And I would drive past them and I just had this feeling of like, I don't want to be buried there. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
But like it was a real visceral feeling of like, mm-mm, nope. And I remember early in my journalism career, I interviewed a lady who had been in a pretty serious car accident and she was really struggling to get around. And if you can't drive in Houston, you can't go anywhere.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I just don't think I want to grow old in this city. I think for lots of reasons, it was great for this moment in my life,
Yep.
transitioning to living in America, but it's not my forever home.
And you guys spent about a decade there too.
Yeah,
So it
exactly.
wasn't, you weren't just in and out. You
No.
really, yeah.
And I think, and I'm sure you know this, and anyone listening who's familiar with Texas, who maybe not from there, people have all these preconceived notions about what Houston will be like or what Texas will be like. And I just found Houston to be this incredibly friendly and welcoming city. It like in ways that I could never have imagined. And it really did feel like home for those 10 years that we were there. And I'm still connected to people from there and they're still like very much in my life. My best friend is from there and we're in touch almost every day. So it holds a special place in my heart. But I said, I just don't want to live through another hurricane.
Hmm.
And I think the life here we have is just not right for us for the next however long. So my husband's had an opportunity. I feel like this is the story of my life, is always kind of like moving kind of where his work will lead us, which
Hmm.
sort of the nature of the beast. It got me to America, which I'm delighted for. So there was a chance to move for a couple of different jobs. It was either Florida or Pennsylvania. And my husband, Nick, had always been back and forth to Pennsylvania and was like, this is a great part. It kind of looks like Ireland. It's hilly, it's green, it's pretty. You live in the Northeast, right? So you
Yeah,
sort of, you know, that
I
that
do.
feeling.
Yeah.
And probably when you went to Ireland, you were like, huh, yeah, I can see the
Yeah.
sort of the overlap.
Yeah.
So it made sense for us. So we moved, and I just was so sure, Stephanie, that like I knew exactly where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. And we moved to Philadelphia, and it wasn't what I imagined it to be at all. It was so hard to restart. And I thought, well, I just did this 10 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
rebuilt my life and started over, and surely it's going to be really straightforward to just do it all over again. Like, I
Now,
know this.
now let me see. When you
Yeah.
moved to Houston, you were 24, 25?
No, a little bit older, probably like, I think 27, 28.
Okay. So then when you
Yeah.
moved to Philadelphia, you were 37, 38,
Yep.
which brings
Yep.
us to the beginning of our story.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it is the magic hour for the midlife transition.
Uh-huh.
And you move to a new city thinking you've got it all under control. You know what you want for a career, you know what you want to
Hmm.
do. Radio is really easily transferable,
Hmm.
journalism is really easily transferable. So you get to Philly, and then what?
Hi. So you know the way you feel like there's a couple of moments that are probably the looking back now, the roadmap of like the
Yep.
crisis that you hit,
Yes.
right? This the little signpost of like, oh, this isn't going to go well. Uh,
I do.
so
I usually ignore them in my life. That's my story. My story is, wow,
yeah,
look at that pretty sign. Meow.
yep, that's pretty much what I did. Yep,
Oh,
yep.
okay. I knew I
But
liked
but is
you.
But isn't it also like you've no idea what 40 is going to feel like? So there's
Yeah.
also like that's part of it. It's just like, how do you've no frame of reference? So you're like, I didn't know I was careening off the rails, but here we are.
Yes. Right.
And these were the signs that I was about to maybe
Yeah.
go off the rails. So arriving in Philadelphia, thinking I'm going to stay in public media. And that was actually part of the reason why we picked Philly, because WHYY is a great public
Hmm.
radio station. It was a no-brainer. And I spent 3 months just looking for work. I wasn't in any hurry. And suddenly I was at home with my daughter all the time, every day for the first time, like for such an extended period of
Hmm.
time. So in Ireland, you go back to work a year after you've had a child. So you actually do get that time and you adjust, or a little bit more if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So that was the most amount of time I probably spent with her. And my job as a journalist had been pretty demanding too. So
Hmm.
suddenly it's me and her against the world every day. And I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I would go to networking events, and I because I thought I was going to go into radio and I wasn't working, I was like, who am I?
Mm.
I was so defined by my job, and I was so sure that that's what I wanted. And journalism, as you know, can be all consuming, right?
Totally.
It never, like, news never sleeps now. There's never kind of a
Yeah.
break from all the information coming at you. And so
You
you're
don't,
always on.
yeah, you don't turn that part of your brain off, because even if you are in your quote unquote off time, you're
Yeah.
still have those glasses on, right? You're always looking
Yeah.
at the news, looking for the news. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
it's almost like always being in a state of like fight or flight,
Yeah.
which makes it sound really negative, but it's just that you're all
Alert. You're on a state of alert. That's what
exactly,
it is.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it took a good month for me to stop checking my emails as obsessively as I would have been when I was a journalist, and to just really like slow down.
Mm.
So that was sort of like road marker number one, that suddenly here I was, 38, not knowing kind of who I was because my work was removed. I'm like,
Right.
who am I without my job?
Yeah.
Right? What defines me? What do I like to do
Yeah.
with my spare time? Right?
Right.
Because now I have a lot.
Yeah. How old
Um,
was your daughter at the time?
so she was 6,
Oh,
going on 7 when we moved here.
yep. So
Um,
so into school too, which did mean that you had a bunch of free time.
well, not quite at that stage because the way the school year ended in Texas, it ended like literally the end of May. So
Oh,
we
I
moved like
see.
June 1st.
And you
So
were
it was all,
between. Mm,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was all summer, me and her hanging out. And we only had one car. So like doing day trips on the train, or
Yeah.
how we would spend our time. So it was like such an awakening in
Yeah.
so many ways. And probably like one of the most challenging times of my life, because I mean, it's so funny to think that like when I parent her all the time, it's like, yeah, but that was just so different and so
Mhm.
intense. So here we are trying to build our new life, exploring. And I was networking. I would use contacts I had in Houston to connect me with people in Philly. So I was going to events and meeting new people and trying to kind of build a network. The one thing I learned from journalism was that the best way to get to know a city is to really connect with the people who drive the city or who are building it, who are internally connected. And so that was the first thing I did when I moved to Philly, was like, how do I meet the movers and the shakers who intimately know the city so that I can get a sense of it and figure out like where I fit.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and then sort of fast forward, I pick a job that comes up. I get offered a job, and it's a great opportunity, and it feels like I'm on the right track, but I'm also not, because I think I had a notion that I was gonna get more entrenched in a nonprofit, like maybe in a leadership position, because working in public radio, it's a giant nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved work where you care, where you can make a
Yes.
difference.
Yeah.
So, and that's obviously the stories I would do as a journalist too. So I was like, okay, so this is the job I'm going to work at, and this is the life I'm going to build. And then, as we all know, right? I mean, I'm sure as we look at people who turned 40 between sort of 2020 and 2021, right? Such an unusual time
Yeah.
for everybody,
Yeah.
period. And then on top of that, you're sort of figuring out who you are again, because I feel like the part of that stage of life is that moment of, who am I? Like, I know what I was up until this point. Like, I just
Yeah.
assumed that I was going to keep on going, staying in radio, doing this. And suddenly I have this pause for 3 months. And I'm questioning everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I like, maybe I would have come to that point anyway if I hadn't had that pause,
Mm.
or maybe I would have come to it later. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, second kind of road signal was, this job was not the perfect fit for me. It was great in so many ways, but it wasn't an ideal working environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I needed to leave. And that was the, oh, well, what if I leave? What do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you at that job? It sounds like pretty short term.
It was, I think, in total about 3 years,
Oh, longer. Okay.
but
Yeah.
but full time with them, it was about kind of 2 years. Yeah.
So you had the pause when you moved to Philly,
Yep.
which kind of gave you the opportunity to notice some things.
Yep.
And then you jumped into this job and spent a couple of years. Well, now you've got one eye open, kind of noticing what you had noticed during your pause, and you're working in an environment that's not fitting, which I've
Mhm.
been there. It's like, I love
Mm,
the job description, it's great, this should be the
mm,
best. And yet the
mm,
environment just was so not a fit that it ended
mm,
up being really difficult. So
mm,
so you already had one eye open and now this thing
mm,
isn't fitting. So
mhm.
tell me a little bit about how that job ended or how you decided to leave that. Was it messy or did you know enough to say, I think I should leave here?
Yeah, so the leaving wasn't messy, but this is 2021, January 2021, and I'm talking to my husband about my job, and I lose it. I feel like he doesn't know what I'm feeling. He doesn't understand what's going on. It's like this moment, because I think it's this build up, right? I didn't
Yes.
notice everything had been building up and building up and building
Yeah.
up. He was just he was an innocent bystander. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. I'm like, let me apologize to him. He didn't realize it was in midlife crisis.
Right, right. Because you looked the same as you did last week.
I know. I know. From the last hour, even. I was like,
Right,
suddenly, who is this?
right.
And so like Stephanie, like I lost it. I fell apart,
Mm,
fell apart. I was bawling my eyes out. I was screaming. I was like, I stormed out of the house. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. I don't even,
yeah,
I think I just walked probably around the block.
right,
I really
right.
didn't go far, but it was like, I don't know, I can't, wow, what is
Yeah.
it? And I came back, and I'm a tea drinker. I put on the kettle, I made myself a cup of tea, I cut myself a slice of banana bread, and I went to bed. And I went to bed for like the next day. And that like, I just was like, "This is it. This is my new home now. I'm
Yes.
living here."
I live in this bed.
Yeah. "Can you forward my mail to me?"
Yes, yes. My daughter will come and visit.
Exactly. But and that was the thing too. I was like, I actually didn't wanna see anyone. I was like,
Yeah,
"No, like, just stay away. Like, I don't know what's going on,
yeah,
but I'm just falling apart right now." And so that was the really messy moment because you know the way and this is what 40 is. You're so sure about where you're going and what you're doing, and then when you're not, you don't know what to do with it.
yeah.
It's terrifying.
Right? They are diametrically opposed. Like, I
Mm,
know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I'm 38 years old. I've been doing this for 20 years now. I'm an adult. I can do all these things. And then all of a sudden, it's like a switch flips. And it's like, wait, none of those things are true. I don't
yeah,
know who I am. I don't know what I'm
yeah,
doing. I don't know where I'm going.
yeah.
And I may have been an adult for 20 years, but that's all moot now.
Yep. And
Oh
it's
my
why am I
goodness.
here? What
Yeah.
am I doing? What is it all about anyway? Like, what is it for?
Yeah.
And it was the scariest feeling to be so uncertain.
Yeah.
Um, and so what was crazy in the interim of this, I had started getting into gardening and got really, like really, really into it. And so I built a website. I call myself the mediocre gardener and sort of like started leaning into it. And in building that, I was like, I wonder could I build a business? Like I wonder do I know enough to be
Mhm.
able to work with like other female entrepreneurs or small nonprofits who just don't need a full-time communications person? Because that's what I was doing sort of in the switch that I mean, it's inevitable you go from journalism to PR, right? That's
Yes,
kind of how the world works.
it is.
And I just thought maybe that's what I can do.
Mm.
And so that started kind of percolating and I think
Were
it
you
that was
still in
scary.
were you still in bed at that
Bed.
point? Because I know you stayed there for
um
a couple of days. Were you
I
still
did.
Yeah,
I did. You know what? I think I was because I was sort of like, I need to figure out like a way forward. So
yeah.
things just started kind of settling in. And I think too, I had been thinking, I was like, do I want to even just change my career?
Mhm.
And do I maybe even want to do like horticultural therapy or something? I was thinking
Right?
any kind of possibility. I was open to it all.
Hi. We'll get back to the conversation in just a minute. Whether you're new here or you've been listening for a while, I'd love to stay in touch beyond the podcast streaming platform. I've got an email series that takes you deeper into the backstory of the show, the 40 Drinks project that kicked this whole thing off, and the midlife questions so many of us are wrestling with. It's part personal story, part midlife decoder ring, and part let's just figure this out together. It's real, it's a little rambly, and probably the best way, and people tell me it feels like getting a letter from a friend who just gets it. And it might just make you feel a little less alone. So if that sounds interesting to you, head on over to thebig40.com and click subscribe right in the main navigation. I'd love to have you there. All right, back to the show.
And I think in searching for that, I was like, well, what if I just use my skill set to do my own thing? And I think this is a lot of women's stories, right? Is so few of us think about building our own business or becoming entrepreneurs. And then it just sort of is the only thing that makes sense. And it's almost like accidental.
Yes. Oh, that is my story 100%. I was in
Mm,
that job that wasn't fitting. And I remember, I don't know, 6 months before it all came to a head, I remember there was a thought that went through my head that was like, well, what if I went out on my own?
mhm,
And the immediate response was, well, what do you have that anybody would pay for? Like, I had
there it is.
no idea what
There.
I would quote unquote sell. And
Mm,
now I'm a little older than you and sort of come a little bit more attached to that sort of very traditional thing that was happening in the 70s and the 80s. And I, as creative and open as I am, I tend to miss things the first time by. So I
mm,
wasn't
mm,
I wasn't as aware of how easy it was to hang a shingle. And I was so focused on doing my job for
mhm,
companies that it didn't strike me that I could take my skills to the marketplace and utilize them. Although that is what ended up happening. And And this month, my business is 18 years old. So, it
Stop.
was the right thing, but
Wow.
absolutely, totally, completely an accident for me.
Yep.
My situation ended very poorly because I did not see enough of the road signs. And once that ended, I had a friend who was I
Or
guess
like a
just a
career coach.
career coach. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
I get you.
she said to me, she said, Now's the time and you will find the money and we're going to work together." And she almost didn't give me a choice. And I kind of thought, oh, I'm 36 years old. Like, I know who I am. I know what I'm good at, right? Like,
Sure.
I think I know all this stuff. And we did a bunch of the assessments and most of them came out in the same area that I already knew, but they added some context. There were things that I did learn. And so I had said to her, like, while we're doing this, I'm going to go and do some freelance work because I've got some bills to pay. And so, yep, great. And so I thought these were two parallel tracks. And
Mm.
about 6 months later, I picked up my head one day when we were meeting and I said, well, what if I did this?
Mhm.
And she basically kind of went, welcome to your life. Like it was not a surprise to her. She was biding time until I figured it out because she couldn't
Yep.
tell me because I would just have said, no, that's not possible. And it turned out that not a single person in my life was surprised by this. My parents, people used to work for me, friends. No, I was the only one who was wildly surprised that I was going to be an entrepreneur.
But is that one of those things where you're so close to it, you just can't see it?
So there's a piece of that for sure. And if I go back probably at least 4, maybe 5 or 6 years before I left that job, I had not had a great I had great jobs, but
Mhm.
they weren't great fits in that I could only last
Mm.
somewhere about 18 months, 2 years, and then I was off to something else. Actually, if I go back even further, it was longer than that. So it just I could never find the right fit for me environment-wise or company-wise
Mm.
or boss-wise,
Mm.
even though I loved all the work that I was doing. And
Sure.
so I didn't notice that. And
Mhm.
I didn't notice that as a pattern, as a
Mm.
long-standing pattern. I noticed it
Mhm.
in individual when it happened once, I noticed it then. It happened again, I noticed it then. Um, so there was a piece of like not sort of taking my brain and pulling it up for a 20,000 foot view
Sure.
of kind of
Sure.
what was going on. But there's a piece of your story that I think is really important, and that is the pause.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
pause.
Another pause. Another pause. Yeah.
Because for me, it was so like head down, like work, 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 go, 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 do, do, do. I was involved in the business community and I was involved in a bunch of nonprofits and when there was just so much and it was just keep going, keep running, keep
Yep.
running.
Yep.
And I never did take the time to stop and just think and to
Mm.
let ideas bubble up and to
Mhm.
let my inner voices be heard. I was just pounding the pavement so hard on all of the things I was doing. And so that's why the pause that you had when you moved to Philadelphia was so interesting to me because in other people's stories that I've heard as well, like people who take the time to hear their inner voices, to
Mm.
listen to them, even when they say scary things like you're not doing the right thing with your life, right? Or
Mhm.
right. So it
Mhm.
might be saying scary things, but I never would have given it a chance to speak up. So again, there's things that I did that made the whole transition much harder.
Sure.
And again, part of the reason for doing this is to showcase how other people get through it in a much more graceful way than I did. And
Oh,
even
none of us do. No, none of us do,
oh,
right?
trust me,
But
they're
there
out there. They're out there. Introspective, thoughtful people who listen to their inner voices and haven't
Uh-huh.
buried them under 1,000 pounds of concrete.
I love it. I
I've
love
met
it.
a few of those people. They're lovely.
Do you know what's funny when you say to me about the pause is it kind of makes me think that actually that when my first pause when we
Mhm.
moved to Philadelphia,
Yeah.
that I started to think like, what do I like to do?
Yeah.
What are my hobbies? What makes me me outside of my job? What defines me as a person? And so what's interesting is that was like the beginning of the journey,
Yes, it
right?
was.
And that's where I started getting into plants and gardening and sort of like working on that. So this is like 2018. And then fast forward to 2021 between, like I said, kind of that pause, thinking about like, who am I, having a better work-life balance. And I don't know if this was you, Stephanie, but I was so focused on what success and right look like,
Yes.
so focused on that that I forgot to think about what happy looked like,
Oh,
right? And I didn't realize that success didn't mean happiness and it didn't feel right. It just felt like success for success sake. And when you talk about driving yourself, right? So I paused and it changed me a little
mhm.
bit. And then I found myself pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing to like get to what right looked like and to be perfect and then crash
Yeah.
to my bed with
Yeah.
banana bread and a cup of tea.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and pause again,
And
right?
pause
But
again.
it took almost 3 years, if not more, to kind of to get there.
But the fun thing about that is,
Mm.
and this is going to be funny, right? The seeds that you planted in the first pause
What? Mm-hmm.
were what was blooming in the second pause,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's
mm.
fun because it's actually gardening.
A garden, yes.
But you thought, what if I could start a gardening website, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was your
Mm-hmm.
path out of
Mm-hmm.
being stuck, your brain being stuck in this is what I do, right? So
Yes.
the pause that you took the first time where you started thinking a little bit bigger about yourself and what do you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
want? Not just what are you
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be doing, but what do you
Sure.
want?
Mm.
And that gave you enough bits and pieces that over the course of a couple of years they marinated, they percolated, and then they bloomed and they led you where you were meant to be.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think they led me to, so the reason I say that I worked with this my company for a little bit longer was because I actually consulted with them. So I set up my own PR consultancy and I ended up working with them for a little while longer, which felt like the right thing to do, but it
Yeah.
unfortunately wasn't any better than
Right.
in
Right.
fact, it was probably worse.
Right. Right. Because you already had your patterns established. And so you couldn't really break them. And yeah. And now they could
Yeah,
treat you
yeah.
worse because you didn't really work for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was an outsider, yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, it was what was so nice is what's so funny is I still work with a lot of the people who I met there,
Yeah.
and I help them with their work, and so the people I met there were just incredible, incredible. So it brought me so much, and actually changed me as a person, as a job, like in both the ways that made me feel not so great about myself, but then I felt empowered afterwards. I was like, "Oh, I know things. I can do this.
Yes.
I have confidence in me. I don't have to get it from my work." And
Yeah.
then on the other side, it also because I worked at an organization that helped people experiencing homelessness, it was empowering individuals and it taught me empathy and just so many things and showed me a different perspective on the world that I hadn't experienced. It was a life-changing job in so many ways, in
Yeah.
both good and bad.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I kind of come out of that, I think I can start my own PR consultancy. Suddenly it's like all of the pieces fit together and then it's you can be successful in your happiness, right? And that's kind of what happened. Suddenly I am working with incredible people who are trying to make a difference. I'm helping share their stories and they're wonderful humans to work with. And my job is a joy.
Hmm.
And so coming out on that side of it and kind of building my business and I always like to think that I didn't notice this when I was kind of younger, when I was living in Ireland, but in the United States, I do feel like there's a lot of emphasis on networking and people getting to know each other, right? And sometimes networking for networking's sake, you may never see that person again. And sometimes you click with someone and you don't know how they're going to be in your life, but you want them to be in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in PR, a lot of what you do is build connections with journalists, obviously, and with your clients and between them and with people. And you see opportunities when they arise. And I've always kind of connected people and things. And it's become my favorite thing to do. And there's just the depth of my life because of all of the connections that I built over the years in my work and just in my life. And I think I feel like I was broken and I fell apart and then came out the other side more whole probably than I had ever been, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. You were, if I were to take everything I've learned through these conversations, you were more you at that point than you had been in the 20 or 25 years previous, because in those 20 or 25 years previous, you were so focused on, and you said it earlier, you were focused on what right was and what success
Mhm,
was, and
mhm,
all of the
mhm,
supposed tos. I'm supposed to
mhm.
do X, Y, and Z. And then when you broke down and then rebuilt, you rebuilt the thing that fit you better.
Mhm, mhm. That is unique to me. I'm not trying
Correct.
to follow anyone else's path. And
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what I was doing. I was like, well, look at them over there. Look at what they're doing. Should I be doing that? And always looking for external validation, which
Mhm.
it's lovely, but also learning that I am enough.
Yes. Yes. That's a thing I want to dig in with you, because when we first met, you said for a long time you were looking at the outside world to tell you
Mhm,
that you were enough. Tell me a little bit about
mhm.
that.
I've always been looking like I'm the baby of my family, right? So there's probably some truth in that I got all the attention being the baby. And then there's some truth that I was also the baby. So I got forgotten about because I was the baby.
Sure.
And so I believe that I didn't do a good job until I was told I did a good job for the
Mm.
longest time in a lot of my jobs. And I remember before I moved to Philadelphia, I had really, really great bosses and they were so supportive of me and they believed in me more than I believed in myself,
Mhm.
and they were my best cheerleaders, and so when I moved here, I kind of brought their confidence with me, but it because it wasn't mine, it was theirs, it didn't
Right.
last,
Right.
and so it kind of took going through a job where I was being questioned and second guessed, and I didn't have that belief that I knew I had to find it within, and one of the things I used to get as a journalist is people would always like reach out and send really nice emails and really kind emails about stories I had done. And I used to keep them in a file thinking, I'm going to be having a tough day and I'm going to look at these and they're going to make me feel better. And I never looked back at them
Mm.
because I realized that that outside praise is so short lived.
Mm.
And there's so much more strength and power in that inside belief.
Mm.
And that's where I came to. And it took 40 years to
Yeah.
kind of feel that. And so I think that was the switch. Suddenly like, no, I'm good enough and I don't need like it's so lovely. I have so many wonderful clients who are like my best cheerleaders as well as me being their best cheerleaders, which is why it works and it's such a great relationship. But I also believe I'm good enough now too. And even in those days when I have self-doubt,
Yeah.
I can kind of rally myself much, much better and not look for it from someone else.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that has been, I mean, that I think that's always the thing that sustains us, right? Is that we don't realize that's what we need, that we just need to believe in ourselves. But when you do and you kind of at least spot it, you're halfway there.
Yeah, and it's a much deeper resource. It's a much deeper well than looking, because
Yes.
like you said, the outside, it doesn't stay with you. But if you can believe in yourself that you are good enough, smart enough, a good enough business person, whatever it is, that'll stick with you
Mhm,
over
mhm,
time. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. Oh man. I want to see if so let's go back to
Sure.
being in the bed for just a
Yeah.
moment, because
Sure.
you said something to me when we first talked about when you came out of the bed. You said you were the phoenix.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what I loved was you said there was ash in the bed, or maybe it was banana breadcrumbs.
Little bit of both.
A bit of both.
Yeah, so I'm not the kind of person who pauses, and so the fact that I literally had no idea about where I wanted to be except in bed with a cup of tea,
Yeah.
feeling sorry for myself, completely falling apart.
Yeah.
And then finally, when I emerged, I felt like I was reborn, this phoenix, sort of like reborn from the ashes, or yeah, was it the breadcrumbs of my banana bread? I don't know. It was one or the other. But it was, or the crumbs of like lying still and
Yeah.
stationary for a couple
Right.
of days.
Yeah.
But it was that moment of like, yeah, feeling like a completely different person, or maybe like a butterfly emerging from the cocoon. Just this idea of you're like reborn, like
Right.
I'm new again. Oh
Right. Right.
God,
Right.
because I'm
And the cocoon is a really messy stage where they break down all the way into goo. There is no
yeah,
physical form there in the cocoon. It is goo.
that
And
sounds right.
so,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, yeah. I mean, which is it's a great metaphor, right? Because if you break down, it's best not to, if you can, it's best
yeah,
not to resist it. Just go
yeah.
with it. It may feel scary or terrifying or messy, but there's probably something really interesting and potentially great that's going to come out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it funny? You almost kind of wish like you knew that this was going to happen. I was like, and then I could have embraced it, and it would have been great.
Right.
And you're like, nope, it doesn't
Yeah.
work that
No.
way.
No. No, you
If
I'm sorry.
only.
There will be no washing of the hair. We are not going to embrace this. It's going to be gross. We're going to smell.
Exactly.
We're going to have 3-day-old socks on but then you'll get it. Then you get the
This too shall
epiphany.
pass.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Dirty underwear equals epiphany. That's how it works. That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes. I love it. I love it. Oh, Edel, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being here with me, and for being so generous with your story. I really appreciate it. You've given us just another great illustration of what this transition can look like and how great it can be on the other side.
Oh, I know. I know. That is the best gift, right? If I can sort of impart anything, is that who I am today, to your point, I'm like happier just in so many ways. I laugh
Yeah.
so much more now than before. I took myself way too seriously.
Yeah.
And now I've come out the other side and I'm like, I am the best version of me that I can be. And that's all you look for, right?
Oh, amen. Fabulous. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening today. I think it's pretty obvious how much fun I had talking to Edel, and I love how her story illustrates a couple of the themes that I hear over and over again about this transition sometime around our 40th birthdays. The first thing that I think her story illustrates so well is the power of a pause. When she moved to Philadelphia, she had a natural sort of 3-month break from work and responsibilities other than taking care of her daughter. And though she thought she knew what she wanted to do, that time off helped her realize how much her identity was firmly woven into her job. Because without that job, she was able to, or maybe she even had to ask herself questions like, what defines me? What do I like to do in my spare time? And what makes me me outside of my job? And if you go back just a little bit, like 3 episodes in my show list, you will see a reflections episode called The Cost of Hustle in Midlife, which dives deep into the power of slowing down. I pulled excerpts from previous conversations with guests who either slowed down willingly or those whose body dealt them a hard stop. And one of the things that I pointed out in that episode was what happens after the pause. According to my guests, there's a moment of quiet. And sometimes we resist it and we try to go back to the hustle right away. And I think Edel did a little of that when she was doing her networking in Philadelphia. She was using that old script despite being shown inklings that things were shifting. So that first pause, when she moved to Philadelphia and stepped away from work for a little while, became a place where she rediscovered who she was outside of her job. She explored what brought her joy and began that slow process of redefining herself on her own terms. And I think it's interesting to note that the process was slow because at the end of that period, she stepped into a job that looked like a good opportunity on paper, but it didn't really fit all that well. And yet she stayed with it for a couple of years. But during those couple of years, she started detaching her assumptions of what she thought her life was going to look like from the reality of this job that just didn't fit. And then, of course, came the breakdown. She fell apart and literally took to her bed with a cup of tea and some banana bread and didn't get out for several days. And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback someone else's transition story from the comfort of my podcast perch, but I want to acknowledge just how hard it is to allow yourself to pause, especially when everything around us rewards nonstop productivity. And what's even harder than pausing is trusting that pause, trusting that it's for a reason, trusting that the discomfort, the questioning, the quiet might actually be meaningful, trusting that this pause has a greater purpose. There's part of me that does wonder what might have happened if Edel had followed the questioning that surfaced during that first pause in Philadelphia, instead of jumping back into something quote unquote productive. But truly, that's just not always possible. Most of us don't get to stop life completely to figure things out. So maybe the point isn't whether she moved on too quickly or not, but that when the second pause came, she let that one crack her open. She didn't fight it. She listened. She surrendered. And over time, she let the answers unfold in their own imperfect, slow way. Because I think the bottom line is that moments of stillness, slowing down, or burnout can lead to awakening, reinvention, or healing if only we'll let them. The second theme that Edel did such a wonderful job of illustrating, and I think is worth pointing out, is redefining success, which is something I hear a lot of my guests doing around this time of life. Edel said she was so focused on what success looked like and what right looked like that she forgot to think about what happy looked like. Can we just take a moment and let that sink in? Are you happy with your life right now? Do you even know what would make you happy right now? This period around our 40th birthdays is when we start realizing the difference between external markers of success and internal fulfillment. It's when we realize that internal fulfillment is something that's even on the table for us. I've learned from a lot of my guests that reinvention during this period isn't about building a shinier resume or taking a more prestigious job. It's about finding joy and ease and alignment. So with that in mind, one last question for you today. Are you building a life that looks good or one that feels good? It's a question only you can answer. All right, next time you are going to meet Sabrina Victoria, who turned to Google when she was about 30 to ask, "Why is my boyfriend bullying me?" And that answer led her to spend years secretly building a new life while trapped in a financially and emotionally abusive relationship. During her 30s, she reclaimed her voice, her freedom, and her future. And next time, you'll hear how she did it and what it looks like on the other side. I'll see you next time. The Big 4-0 podcast is produced and presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications.